Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. So video number 2, where now we've had a look at the video earlier about logic app caching and how we used APIM configured to cache responses and basically take some of the load off call and downstream logic apps to integrate into systems if it's a repeated scenario where we can cache it. So what I want to do this time is have a look at how we build that API in API management. So I like to use Terraform for building my APIs, and here I've got my Terraform solution. So I like to start, if you've seen any of my previous videos, I like to start with this main.tf where it gives me a logical place where my head can start thinking about Terraform. So I can go in here, you can see I've registered the Terraform Azure provider, I've set it up. I've got a resource group, I've got some key vault stuff, this is just some default stuff I usually have in. And here I'm pointing at an Azure API management instance which I've already got set up, so I'm using the data attribute here so I can point at it and start adding some APIs without worrying about changing the APIM settings. And what I'm going to do up here is I've got this logic app helper API, so I've created a resource of API management API. It's my utility API for logic apps. I've got a path here, so it's, you know, from my side it's a platform service. I'm going to point it at the management API for Azure on the back end. That doesn't really matter that much because I'm going to do a lot of stuff in the policy here, so that doesn't really matter too much. What you can do though, I've got a default policy on the API level here. You may want to do something like one of my previous posts about locking down some of your services if you want to restrict it to certain logic apps. So you've got an ICE and you want to restrict it in some way. There's a couple of things I've done previously about that. You can also put some kind of security at API level if you wanted to as well. That's kind of outside the scope of today's video. So what I've got up here, the first API we're going to look at is my GetCallbackUrl. So here I'm going to define an API operation. It's my GetCallback one. I've given it the API management and the resource group they belong to, and here I've specified the API which comes from my other file. The operation itself, so I've got to give it an ID, which that should be a unique ID. I've given it a name and a method, and then I've got the URL template is callbackUrl / logic app name, and I've defined that as a template parameter here, so that I'll see that as something I can reference in my policy. And I'm also supplying a cache timeout seconds here. I can't remember whether I implemented that, I'll have to check. And what we're going to do in the policy here, so this object for Terraform is a policy operation, and basically it's pointing at this API up here, this API operation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference a file, and I'm going to inject the content of that file to be the policy. So that file's over here, and that's got all the details of my policy. And so that is a general pattern. That's kind of how I'm building these API operations. Specify the API, have a policy pointed at an XML file, or a file containing XML, and then just import it when you do the deployment. So here's in the previous video I walked through some of these policies showing what they were doing. The run one, so the run API here, again, it's got an operation ID, a display name, a method, URL template, so I'm going to supply the logic app name and then run, template parameter again, and then I'm going to inject the policy, and the policy comes from this file here, so people can have a look through and stuff. And likewise the one with cache, so the only real difference is that it's got this cached and cache key at the end, and it has its own policy file here. Now what happens is when I run this with Terraform, so first off I'll validate my Terraform files, so I know that's good, and then I'm going to just apply them here, and that'll go and check, and I think that should come back saying that it knows that my API is currently up to date, matching the Terraform specification, so it shouldn't need to make any changes. So we'll give that a moment or two to run through. I think I must have changed something, so it wants to change something here. I think I might have tweaked the policy slightly, so we'll just run that. That'll go and apply an update to that policy, and that's really it basically. So I can run my Terraform. It's going to deploy the change to my API out. You can see it's already applied that change to the policy there. Now, what I've done is over in my GitHub, so I've got my API management samples here, and I've published this solution in this folder, which you'll see is a link on the blog article that goes with this. And this has got all of the policy files, and it's got the Terraform definitions for this API. So if anybody wants to, in theory, you could just grab this code, point it to you, change the variables so it points to your own API management, and then you can just run it and you should be good to go. But you can, the idea is people can have a look through and learn how it's set up and see if that same approach would help everybody else. Thanks for listening, and hope everybody's keeping well.